Welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about I don't know. I want to talk about what's going on in this country right now. And one of the things that just caught my attention was I saw that Tom Hanks was saying "shame on me," and by that I mean that where I live in a very small town in Montana, and generally speaking, through all this, we've had very, very, very little outbreak, and it's one of those things where typically I've actually been, throughout this whole pandemic and everything, I've actually been the healthiest that I've been in a long, long time. I have four kids, one of which goes to an elementary school, and so him going to this elementary school, I was probably getting sick along with everyone else in the household with a basic cold or whatever about once a month. Since this has outbroken and my oldest doesn't go to school anymore, he took it online and then it's out for summer. Yeah, we've all been doing great. So typically, I don't go out a lot socially, and when I do, I don't wear a mask unless I'm required to. If I am required to, I will. I have no problem complying with helping people, feel comfortable and so forth. But I would say the vast majority of people out in the valley, where I live, don't wear masks. And again, we've had one death in the entire county that I live in since this whole outbreak. So again, our lack of complying with all these measures isn't harming us. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't, especially too. Again, if I grew up in Seattle, so if you're coming from a highly densely populated area where there's so many people coming in contact with each other, it makes sense to wear a mask and so forth. But that being said, with everything that's going on in this country and in this world, with all the problems that we have, that we face, for somebody to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to be telling other people, shame on you if you're not doing what I'm doing, is pretty pathetic. Generally speaking, I like Tom Hanks. I liked a lot of his movies growing up and so forth, and I'm not going to boycott him or do anything extreme like that. That being said, I'm not going to let him try to shame me and shame others who don't simply, abide by his rules. Again, we're talking about somebody who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who lives in the lap of luxury, who has the greatest privilege in the world, which is wealth, telling other people how to make their choices. Again, you're thinking of somebody who's got hundreds of millions of dollars, who pisses so much of it away just living his luxurious life, and there are millions of people starving from starvation, dying from starvation in the world. There are thousands and thousands of people in this country who are starving, and you're going to tell us shame on us because we don't wear a mask. Again, it's just this thing where it's just like, this is why so much doesn't get done, is you have these entitled elitists telling people how to live their lives. It was one of my favorite things that I've seen come out of Hollywood lately was that Ricky Gervais thing at the Golden Globes, where he pretty much told them to go F off, because that's what they were doing, was that they talk constantly about how they care so much and this and that and that. It's honestly, I don't know if people would know this reference, but to me, I think they're a bunch of Pontius Pilates. They wash their hands of responsibility because they're constantly advocating for change, but they don't actually do anything to invoke change. In fact, they're the biggest part of the problem. You look at the concept of them constantly bashing on these uber wealthy people, the one percenters, blah blah blah, and how they're all about helping each other and whatever. And it's like, no, you're not going to part ways with your money when it comes down to it. You're not going to let go of your hundreds of millions of dollars, because again, I like to be informed, and so a few weeks back, I looked up what it was to be a one percenter. Because we use that reference. I've used that reference numerous times. And I found out you had to only make $788,000 to be considered a one percenter. So when you're thinking of guys like Tom Hanks, who are worth, I want to say he's worth like $300 or $400 million. Yeah, they're in the minuscule. I looked it up. It was like a tenth of a percent. You only have to make $7 million to be considered a tenth of a percent of the country. So he's in the somewhere of the hundredth or maybe even 1,000th of a percent. And he's telling us about how to live our lives, and he's saying shame on us. Again, I'm not feeling it at all. I think it's really sad how the people that have the platform are constantly abusing it. I don't have a problem with people using their platform to reach out to people, because they can really invoke change. They can really, again, they can reach out to millions of people. But when you look at what their message actually is, so many times they're lecturing us, and they're grandstanding, they're virtue signaling, they're acting like they somehow have the moral high ground, when in fact they are the if you want to talk about the most privileged demographic in this entire country, in this world, it's the wealthy in the United States, the uber wealthy, and the vast majority of them are in Hollywood. If you think about how many of them are getting paid tens of millions of dollars annually to make movies, again, it's just one of those things. And I'm not necessarily bashing on the fact that they have this money, but it's the fact that they have this money and this wealth and this power, and then somehow they act like that they're one of us, but they're the noble part of us. They're the ones who have the courage to speak. And I'm like, no, you're just doing it because you probably because you feel guilty, honestly. Probably because you realize that you are stepping on the throats of so many other people and you are looking the other way. And you're taking giant paychecks from people that are doing horrible things, that are running sweatshops. And so you feel this guilt. And so you constantly feel this need to counteract that by making silly little clips with that song Imagine, where all the celebrities got together, like somehow that we all needed some entitled dinks who have gobs of money who are quarantined to their 20,000 square foot mansions, just like us, right? Going through it together. Yes, I would love to see how long they would last if we got to switch houses, and if they got to switch houses and we all got quarantined. I'd go to quarantine 6 months in one of those mansions. Someone tells me, it just reminds me of that song from Good Charlotte, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Just constantly complaining about how hard it is to be wealthy and stuff, and it's like, please, that's how good you have it, is you actually think that somehow the challenges that you face are somehow dwarfing that of ours. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't wear a mask if required. I've read stories and so forth about people that have defied it and gone into their own ballistic psychopathic behavior of freaking out on people and stuff and cursing them out because they're not wearing a mask. And it's like, no, I'm not cool with that. If a local our Costco in town requires everyone to wear a mask, and so yeah. Now, fortunately enough, I had my wife's the one with the Costco card, so I don't have to go shopping. But if I was ever to go shopping at Costco or any other place that required a mask, I would not cause any problem. I would comply. I have no issue trying to support others in their mental well-being, because again, I feel like to me, looking at all the procedures that we're going through, I really feel like the wearing the mask is really just for people. I don't say people's mental well-being, but just to make them feel good. Because if you look at so many different areas that we're not wearing masks, again, people will social distance. My wife went to lunch a few weeks back with some of her sisters, and they had to get the food to go because because of the social distancing and the seating requirements and so forth. They were only allowed to have 6 people at a table. And I'm just thinking to myself, so does the 7th person have corona or something? Like, what's the premise of this? And if one of them has it, you're going to pass it. But if there's 5 people at the table, it doesn't mean you're less likely or something. But again, it's just these silly things that people are giving into for because other people are panic thinking that somehow if they comply with this OCD type behavior, that it's going to prevent them from getting disease. And I'm saying, again, I don't generally have an issue with complying to a certain degree. I don't have an issue with helping other people feel comfortable and safe. But at the same hand, to have this self-righteous attitude, like, shame on you if you don't do what I'm doing. Again, I mean, that just reminds me of a certain president telling people, and again, he didn't say it as gracefully, shame on you for kneeling. Because this is the time for the military. Again, this is just something that has been getting under my skin, where people are somehow prioritizing the pain of others, or prioritizing their own pain over others. And again, this isn't a matter of whose pain hurts more. But I will certainly say that my pain hurts no less than anybody else's. Me losing my twin brother in action doesn't hurt any less than anybody else's pain. So I'm not going to be silent about how I feel about these things and about how I feel about these issues, where you have celebrities who are the most entitled people in this country, the most privileged people in this country. I mean, you look at what they do constantly. They're constantly committing crimes. They're constantly drinking and driving and drinking under the influence of drugs and so forth. And I think Martha Stewart got like 9 months home. Was it 6 months or 9 months of home? What the hell is that? She was imprisoned at her mansion, her estate. And again, that sounds like I could use that vacation again. And so, I'm not saying that we should necessarily be excessively harsh on people. I'm not saying that we should cast stones at celebrities who are worth gobs of money because they could invoke change. But it's just the fact that they have this again too, that stupid movie they made the other day about I take responsibility. How are you taking responsibility? Are you cutting checks? Are you going to move out of your mansion and sell all your possessions and just live in a 1,200 square foot house? And what do you mean you take responsibility? You're washing your hands clean of responsibility. I feel like that's what they were trying to say more than anything, is that, and again too, they just say it in this serious, and again, talk to each other. If you're going to lecture people about privilege, you're going to lecture people about what we need to do, lecture your peers. You don't lecture people below you. I don't lecture my children about how they're not doing enough around the house and their social responsibilities. It's the same concept. If you have a higher privilege, then talk to your peers. Don't talk to people who don't have as much access as you, who don't live as privileged a life as you. Anyhow, yeah, it's just really annoying seeing time and time and time again where all these people that have the ability to have a platform, have the ability to really invoke change and invoke thought and so forth, do so in such a piss poor manner to the point where people don't want to communicate. Or you're empowering people to have the sense of moral high ground, to have this sense of self-righteousness where you're casting stones at others. That was one of my favorite I would say, I don't know if you call it a quote from the Bible, a passage. It's the whole, he who has not sinned, throw the first stone. Do not judge lest ye be judged. These premises, and yet you see people constantly casting stones. You see people constantly, just acting like somehow that they can demean and they can belittle and they can judge because of the color of their skin, or they can judge people because of their color of their skin and so forth. I saw one woman dismiss a man's opinion because he was a white man. I'm just looking at him like his gender and his race shouldn't have anything to do with his opinion. Obviously his personal experiences can. You can discuss it in that manner, but there's so many times when so many unhealthy conversations are happening, and again too, that was one of the reasons that I've decided to speak out, was I felt like the people are representing my causes were not doing the greatest of jobs, or they weren't even necessarily connected to my demographic of pain and so forth. So again, it's just, I really want to encourage people who feel able to talk about it and have a healthy discussion to talk about it, because that's one thing that I'm hoping for, is that I'm hoping I can grow this channel and get some, I don't want to say pushback, but some feedback and maybe a little bit of pushback. I do like challenges. I do like talking to people who do have differences of opinion, because that's how I'm going to say there's two benefits to having a discussion with somebody who has a different opinion than yourself. One, you could either reassure you of what you already believe. You're hearing the opposition, and so rather than just having an interpretation of what the opposition is or coming up with your own responses, you can have that. Or two, you can change your mind. There are plenty of subjects that I've changed slightly, dramatically, or altogether over the years of discussing, and that's one thing that for myself gets me very excited about thought, about opinions, about theories, is that the more influence I can have, the more influence outside with other people's perspectives, the more reassuring I can be that I'm closer to being correct, closer to being finding the truth, because I realize that with everything I do, with my entire life, I'm never going to be experiencing everything from every perspective. And so the more feedback I can have, the more perspectives I can get, the clearer picture I can have of what the real truth is. And again, with this, Tom Hanks' "shame on you" mentality, again, it's just such a pompousy, rude, disrespectful attitude. Like somehow we don't all have severe problems. Like, again, if you look at what's going on with mental health in this country, it has skyrocketed since this pandemic. So to assume that somehow that because someone's not complying with you, that they don't have issues, severe, dramatic issues, life-threatening issues that have driven them to the point where they're not just gonna just kneel to your bidding and to your point of view, your perspective on how this needs to be handled, is pretty sad. Because again, there's so many times when these people can reach so many millions and millions of people, and again, this is not just through their own accounts, but it's the fact that there are so many news articles that get written about these, that again they can reach tens of millions, if not more, people with their message, and that's how they're using it, is to have the self-righteous, slap you in the face because you're not behaving as I feel you should behave attitude. Again, that's not unifying. That's not bringing people together. That's not trying to educate. That's having a dictatorship mentality. That's having a tyrannical mentality. And again, too, for people to be attacking the president for having that same mentality and then do it themselves, again, it's just, I can't stand how hypocritical people can be. And it's not to say that we don't all make mistakes. I don't have an issue with that, but it's the constant reiteration of that hypocrisy that I've had enough with, where people are constantly saying, that we need to tolerate each other, and yet they are the most intolerant people I've ever seen in my life. And again, I feel like that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't, go on social media, or when they do, that they're kind of, I don't want to say weekend warriors with their attacks. So they'll blast somebody on the other side, and then they scanter away into the dark because they don't want to read the hate that they've received and so forth. But I feel like a real big reason why we have so much tension is because I feel like a lot of people don't feel like their voices are being heard. I feel like their voices are being spoken. And so again, I feel like that's important for people who do feel like they can have healthy conversations and can give back and forth, to speak up on both sides. Because I feel like that's how we're going to come together, is with the people who, on both perspectives of issues, can do so in a healthy, effective way, where they can talk about their pain and talk about how they observe the opposition or the difference of opinion of others, and how we can come to terms with more understanding. Because I really think it's there. There have been so many times where I have talked to people on different backgrounds and so forth, and we've understood more and more that we were so much more alike than we're different. But again, too, it's that we can't ignore our differences. We need to talk about our differences of opinions with everything going on, because as we can see, it's not going to slow down. It's not just going to disappear. It's not like we're going to wake up and let's say the pandemic stops, and let's say that racial injustices and police brutality diminishes to just to almost never happening, or never happening. That doesn't mean we're not going to have other big serious problems that aren't going to come to the under the spotlight. That's just going to divide us again. And so it's something that we certainly need to figure out how to address these issues, but also just figure out how we can do it effectively. Like I said, I have no issue with celebrities talking to each other about what they can do, or maybe even just trying to be encouraging to the little man who doesn't make that much money. But for them to be shaming us, for them to be having this self-righteous attitude, it's like the people that should be the most humble in this country and the most grateful for their privilege are the wealthy celebrities that constantly are telling us how to live our lives, and constantly telling us and lecturing us about our responsibility and so forth. I don't know how many times you see those commercials where they're asking you to only give $20 a month, and I'm just thinking, dude, you crap out more money on any given freaking your Ferraris and Lambos and your vacations. And I think the Tom Hanks was on vacation with his wife in Australia when he came down with the virus, and I'm like thinking, how many times have I been in Australia in my life? Oh, 0. That's how many times I can get it and then pass it within countries. Did he stay in Australia after he got it? Again, I'm not going to shame people and say that we don't have a certain duty to ourselves and to our families. That, to me, is one of the highest, if not should be highest priority of all of us, is taking care of ourselves and taking care of our loved ones. But I also to have a strong sense of duty to each other as a community, as a nation. I don't have a problem with that. But again, there's this thing where I've just, so many times you've got all these people who couldn't make a difference, and sadly they're making a difference for the worse. They're separating us, they're dividing us, they're using polarizing comments and polarizing stances, rather than just trying to speak calmness and collectiveness and so forth. But as always, good luck and good night.